Hi, welcome and grüezi to a new episode of Governance Unplugged, where today we explore the topic Future Fit Internal Audit, Balancing Governance with Business Agility. I'm Thomas Michel, your host with 25 years of experience in senior positions in internal audit and risk management for the Big Fours, and most recently as the head of internal audit and risk management at the World Economic Forum. Today's guest is Cindy, whose remarkable career spans leadership positions in the Big Fours, as global head of internal audit of a multinational organization, a role as CFO, and now a return to internal audit leadership. Her journey offers a unique and invaluable perspective on the evolving role of internal audit. This makes Cindy the perfect guest for today's conversation. Before we dive into the depths of today's topic, Cindy, it would be wonderful if you could briefly introduce yourself to our listeners.
I certainly will. And hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Cindy or Cynthia Boumann. I actually hail originally from Minnesota, which is kind of in the middle of the U.S. next to Canada, for those of you that may not be as familiar with the U.S. geography. And I've spent a good chunk of my time traveling all over the world. I'm currently speaking to you from Austin, Texas, but by way of New York, and spending some time professionally in Chicago, as well as global multinational roles that have taken me all over the world. So very happy to be here, Thomas.
Thank you. And to warm us up a little bit, I prepared a few light-hearted questions for you, Cynthia. So number one, if you were in a movie, what would be the movie's name and who should play you?
Very important question. Believe it or not, I'm going to cheat a little bit and go with something that already exists. And it's both a movie and a TV series called Bewitched. The original TV series was with Elizabeth Montgomery. And the reason that came to mind was because people have mentioned to me in the past that I look a little bit like her. But importantly, it just is kind of exciting to me, the idea that you can kind of blink your eyes or twitch your nose and something is magically done. So that was one answer that I came up with. But if you're hoping that I come up with something original, the words "the joyful geek" come to mind. I really have a lot of, I love smiling, I love laughing, and I also love very geeky things like tea accounts, documentary movies, and all things business and periodicals. So those were kind of the ideas that I came up with. And I'd probably go back with Elizabeth Montgomery again, or some, lovely looking blonde actress, because that's a lot of my persona.
That is so great. And what was your very first job that you have been paid for?
So, again, I'm originally from Minnesota, and my family very invested in farmland and farming. And my grandfather came over from the area of Germany known as Ostfriesland, I believe is the way that you would put it, and had a family farm. Ostfriesland, yes. And so I was paid for going to do this activity that's not even relevant anymore, but it was called walking beans at the time. But it's basically the act of de-weeding fields of soybeans. And I was 8 years old, and I can still see the check that again, it was a physical check, something that probably doesn't even resonate now with people, but it was a physical check that my grandmother wrote to me for $32 for helping my grandfather walk beans in Minnesota.
That is so nice. And now my preferred question, how would your parents describe your job?
Oh, gosh. It's funny. My father is no longer living, but when I had been working at one of the Big Four, actually, this is how I know Thomas, is through my time at KPMG. And KPMG, as many of you know, went through a number of different, identity changes, as did all of the Big Four. And he thought that I worked at PK Marwick. neither of my parents really worked a lot in the Big Four or in any large businesses, really, because of where we grew up. It was farmland. It was, kind of some of the more, I'd call it, local businesses and things like that. So, kind of a different world that I live in than what the rest of my family grew up doing.
Thank you so much, Cindy, for sharing that. So that leads us to our main topic of the conversation. And I would like to start with shaving the edges, aligning internal audit with business needs. Cindy, you once described internal audit as a square peg in a round hole. So could you please elaborate on what exactly you mean by this and what practical steps can a chief audit executive take to shave the edges and better align internal audit with the evolving business needs in a forward-looking way?
Sure. So the way that I came up with, I guess, that concept of us being a square peg in a round hole is just maybe trying to kind of understand from another point of view how it feels to be audited. I absolutely hate being micromanaged. I hate being detailed reviewed. I'm very much a self-starter, and I really, I love structure. I love having process, but I also, want to make sure that I'm achieving substance, and form is important in certain, venues, but it's not critical in all of them. And it certainly should not ever supersede substance. So that's kind of the genesis of where the phrase came from, because I think a lot of legacy internal audit as a profession, we have the, reputation perhaps of, being very backwards looking, being kind of a cop or being excited about, finding mistakes that someone made when they're running really fast to kind of execute business processes and support customers and do things that we're getting paid for as a company. And I know not all organizations are for profit, but generally speaking, all organizations have a mission that isn't backward looking. It's forward looking. And so, thinking through how as an auditor, you don't become the group of people that everyone loathes to see or loathes to hear from. That's really what I'm trying to figure out is, from a, trying to be somebody that fits in and kind of like runs alongside a business or an organization's mission is really what I'm trying to support for us as a profession, really.
Yeah, this is so true. And is there any moment in time which you could share when adapting the audit practice created more impact or more value for our organization?
One of the CFOs I used to work for, I told him very frankly, is the amount of influence that I have had in an organization, it far goes beyond what is written in a report. And that's, I think, the one message that, probably at the end of this, I would leave you with is just the power you have of influence. It isn't so important to write every single thing down, be alongside the business, be that trusted ear or that trusted advisor and help them. Because again, the mission of the organization isn't to pass an audit. The mission of the organization is something completely different.
As a chief audit executive, to balance governance requirements with the need for flexibility in organization, what would you recommend?
Sure. So I guess the way that I always start is, again, with that mindset of as an auditee, you do not want to be audited. It's kind of the extra job you're not going to get paid for. But we also have our classic little governance model of the 3 lines of defense. And so it starts very frankly with relationships and setting the stage with executive management and with the board. And for us, a lot of times that's the chairman of the audit committee, and making sure that they have the understanding of, look, I'm going to come to you with some issues and problems or challenges or things that are not going according to policy. Meaning, perhaps there's going to be some audit reports that have a not satisfactory rating or something that is other than pristine. That proves that the process is working. And making sure that, first of all, culturally, there's an acceptance for the fact that not every single report is going to be perfect, and having the right sort of reaction to risk. On the one hand, from an audit perspective, you should not ever kind of get excited about tally of findings or being able to say I told you so. That's in a personal perspective as well as in a business context. Nobody is ever going to have more respect for you for saying I told you so. So I would love for people to just absorb that for a moment. We do have a mission to fulfill. We do have like the requirement to be transparent and communicate things so that there's a broad understanding of risk, but we also have, I think, an obligation to try to do it in a way that's supportive rather than I told you so or I gotcha.
I like that. I told you so. Yeah, I fully agree. It's probably not going to help your career that much.
Right. No, it's funny. I've had this discussion with a number of people. Some of my greatest coaching advice ever to team members is no one is going to ever respect you more for saying I told you so. And on a totally different topic is I promise you, you will live to fail again. It is the nature of the human condition. And also, we have to be able to tinker with things and try different things and fail. And I guess it kind of resonates back to the point that I was just making too, is, if we're finding issues and businesses or process owners have not executed something to the letter of the T, perhaps there's a little bit of tolerance and grace for that because we're all going to make mistakes. And if we're not, we're probably not doing things very efficiently or very innovatively. Innovation requires failure. It's just that we have to have a path of fixing it and getting back towards what we really want. And, from my perspective, you can always have, issues with trying to socialize findings with a business owner. And either you agree it's a finding or you agree it's something that has to get fixed or you don't. The rating, it matters in some contexts, but it's just, is it important or is it not? Do we want to put it on the list of things that we need to get done or do we not? So it can be pretty simple, but like I said, every organization has a different set of challenges and strategies that they're trying to execute.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And at the end of the day, you need to agree on the findings together. You can come to a point that sometimes you might not agree, but at least you need to understand the arguments of the other side and come to the conclusion of if this point is going to go in the report or not.
Right.
What brings us to the next point. So mastering the fundamentals, blocking and tackling. You have emphasized the importance of blocking and tackling, getting the basics right. So what foundational capabilities do you believe every chief audit executive must master today, and how can these translate into tangible value for the organization?
I think about this in kind of two buckets. One would be sort of the intangibles or the soft skills. And then the other bucket would be, your technical expertise. And the sad and strange part is that I think the technical expertise is definitely almost more critical at the beginning of your career. And the soft skills and what I would call the, corporate wisdom or gamesmanship or game theory is almost more important kind of later on as you become more senior, because that's when you're, kind of able to, create a little bit more of an impact, but you have to do it in a more artful manner. If I'm talking to more junior team members, I'm saying, obviously we start with solid human being. period, full stop. Because if you're not starting there, you're building on a basis of, like you just can't fix that. So solid human being and really natural curiosity, and interest, and I'm going back to the corny word, it's joy. People don't love happy, giggly, non-serious people in every context, but you still have to kind of approach the concept of audit and anything you do really with some level of interest and excitement and enthusiasm, or joy for doing it. So then it really becomes training, and I'm a big believer in cross-functional training. Another one of my key tenets, if I'm looking for someone to hire, is I look for somebody that brings a special skill to the party. Something that's a little bit more technically deep, but also understands that, your deep, discipline has to be complemented with, kind of a broad array of skills that help you understand a full process. One of the things that, is very typical, I think, in internal audit organizations is having, technical IT or information technology computer skills. And then you've got your business process skills, which, those are people like me, the people that love T accounts and policies and procedures and how do you record transactions. But neither of those two skill sets really live well on their own, and so while you might have a talent or a capability for one over the other, you absolutely have to complement that with, the understanding of the other. And I guess the best way, just from a mere mortal's way of understanding it, I love exercising. And what I've said to some team members before is it's very rewarding to work out the muscles that are already strong. You can see them, kind of pop in the mirror, and you can, admire them. But the issue becomes, especially as you age and as you progress in your career, those muscles that you've never worked out, or their skills that you've never developed, those are the things that are really going to give you the aches and pains as you progress throughout your career.
Yeah, I love that comparison. So how do you, I now, having worked with you, you are a person who is very keen on great quality. And I know that's how you work, that's how your team work. How do you combine like this quality of execution together with staying strategic or developing the strategy of your internal audit function and align this with the strategy of your organization?
I think a couple of things come into play here. One is it's very important to have and continually refine process. And when I say that, that doesn't mean that everything needs to be cookie cutter or follow the same process. In fact, I'm kind of against that. But you really want to have the good foundation, good bones, good structure. And if that's by using an audit technology, so that you have a good way to manage workflow and to kind of take friction out of the things that really do have to be part of, your internal audit. So obviously your planning processes and your, kind of testing execution and your field work and your reporting and your follow-up, have good structure for managing those things, but then tailor that structure. Again, use your artist skills to come back to what makes sense here. And again, if you've got natural curiosity and you enjoy doing these things, it's going to be very easy for you to kind of go, well, wait, let me take a step back here. What am I trying to achieve? What's the best way to support the mission of the organization? Because the mission of the internal audit department is a subset of that. Ultimately, we're trying to support whatever the organization's trying to achieve. And so, yes, we have, a different kind of set of requirements that we have to fulfill, but we're ultimately trying to support the organization. So always remembering the big picture. And it's easy to forget that because you can get very overwhelmed if you have too much structure. So I think it's really just a balance of what amount of structure makes sense to achieve, again, supporting the business, making sure that you get back to your, what are the 3 lines of defense I'm kind of trying to do here? What is the communication I'm trying to make? And ultimately, what outcome am I trying to influence?
You mentioned before this great expression, build corporate wisdom. That brings me to the next point regarding building influence within an organization. So trust is the currency of an internal auditor or an internal audit function. So influence and relationships are often what separates good auditors from great auditors. Could you share strategies that helped you building trust and gain traction across the leadership teams?
Yes, sure. So time is one thing that you really have to appreciate. And the older you get, the more you appreciate what time can do. One thing that I think some people, and I've even been guilty of it myself, is, coming into a new situation, even though people respect you, even though your experience might speak for itself, give people a little bit of time. Because, they're, look at things from another point of view. They're, seeing you as an unknown commodity. And you have to build that up. And while you might not have or need 20 years to build a trusted relationship, give people a little bit of time. Another thing is really to communicate well and communicate in a way where you're demonstrating respect for others' time. A lot of times we are in the company of very senior executives and people who have a high premium on their time. Make sure that you have your act together and you have all of your ducks in a row, so to speak. Even if some of those ducks in the row mean you don't have full information, make sure that you are very straightforward about what you don't know. I myself don't appreciate it when people try to BS me. So if you don't have something really important and relevant to say, I would strongly suggest that you get more prepared, or you put that topic to the parking lot, because, demonstrating that you're only going to deliver facts, you're going to be very transparent about what you do and you don't know and what you think needs to happen, I think is really important. And then, the last thing is just to make sure that you're communicating with your peers. It's interesting the number of times that someone feels like they've been ambushed or they were caught off guard by something. Even if you're just thinking that you're managing upward, you're never just managing upward. You need to manage sideways, upwards, downwards. Your credibility is going to speak for itself over time. If you've ever run a marathon, you know that it's a very long, hard process, and your career, and especially when you're a chief audit executive, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so, you're going to have a mile or two that perhaps are going to be ugly and frustrating. But you need to, kind of understand that you're in it for the long haul. And, it will take you very little time to destroy trust. And it will take you a world of time to build it back up. So that's how I approach it.
Would you have an example to share how you managed skeptic or challenging stakeholders?
It's interesting because it starts with the relationship building. And I would, suggest that the relationship building shouldn't start when you're doing an audit. the relationship building should start way before the audit, and so if that means that, you're going to company events or you're doing meet and greets with, important stakeholders, just to introduce yourself, and it can be a little bit lighthearted, going back to the premise of you want to make sure that they know you respect their time, but you want to be a person that they know before you're going to do an audit. And then, making sure, especially in the first and second time that you're working with them, that you have your act together. You're not half-assing it. You're not, trying to kind of just throw the spaghetti against the wall to see if it's going to stick. You've really done your homework. And I think once you've done that, you're always going to have a challenging person or two. And that's, that's true of every single discipline. Sometimes we in audit feel like we're the only ones. Every single role has that. And you just have to be steadfast, listen. Don't just assume that you have every single piece of information, even when you've done your homework well. Listen, and then go back to kind of like, all right, what's trying to be achieved here? And sometimes policy is just not appropriate for certain business situations. And sometimes deviations from policy make sense. So it's kind of think about it in those terms and think through it with your stakeholders. And again, every once in a while, you're going to have somebody anyway that's going to be difficult, but more often than not, you're going to be able to get over that challenge.
Do you think that being a trusted business partner or an advisor to the business and being close and understand them, it affects also somehow the independence of internal audit?
It can, I guess. I think that internal audit is a little bit unique, and I'm visualizing right now the 3 lines of defense in my mind. We have a different set of, we're a different line than external audit in the famous COSO diagram. They truly are the independent, far right kind of, they're signing off on an opinion. And internal audit, we've got our dotted line into management and our direct line into the board and the audit committee. Yes, we have to be independent of those processes, but that means not executing the processes. So if we're going to build relationships within the business, I think management and the board, I've had audit committee chairs, talk to me about how much time they appreciate when I'm spending with the business. You can't truly understand what they're doing if they only see you in the same kind of context that they see an external auditor. You're still part of the company. You're still part of the business. And so I think inherently is, for instance, the company's, signing your paycheck anyway. Is there independence at violation there? Yes, absolutely, because they're signing your paycheck. So it's not going to be pristine. But, can you overcome that, theoretical independence lapse? I think so. It starts with being a solid human being, and it starts with, understanding what your role is in the 3 lines of defense. And then, like I said, it's fine to support the business.
Thank you for sharing this. I think this is extremely important, especially these days, to be professional, to be an advisor, to create assurance, but still finding the right middle way of proper independence, but still being close to the business and being support to the organization and create value through all your insights that you can bring and the conversation you can have and facilitating workshops, etc. So I think this is really an important thing to keep in mind for internal auditors. Agility for internal auditors, it's more and more important. So, but it's kind of a cultural shift within internal audit. So it remains a challenge within internal audit departments, even as the business clearly demands more agility from the internal audit department. So why do you think flexibility remains a tough area for internal audit, and what mindset or cultural shifts could help foster a more agile function?
So I would be lying to you if I told you that I have this figured out. because I really don't. And in fact, I've got a few situations right now where, I'm trying to bridge that gap myself. And maybe I'll start with some of the challenges that I see and, a few ideas that I've had some success with, but, there's work to be done here. First of all, just in being able to develop an audit plan that, your team can, everybody can't be audited at the same moment in time. You have to have kind of almost a level load. And so you have to come up with a plan that's often 12 to 15 months looking forward. And coming up with that plan 12 months in advance of when you're going to execute the audit, that's forever in terms of business. And so, you have to communicate and get approval from an audit committee, that you're thinking the right way about risk. But you also have to tell them, I'm coming to you with this set of things that I think we need to execute this year. But in 9 months' time, it might not be relevant to do X or Y or Z. And so, that is one of the challenges that I see. And then even just individual audits and projects, it drives me nuts. And I had an experience many years ago where I swear the audit team that I came out to visit, it was like they showed up in the audit at the location, and that was the first time that they thought at all about what that location did. And you can't do that. That's again demonstrating that you're wasting people's time. So in order to do an effective audit, you need to spend you have to have a whole process on the front end where you're doing some data analysis, you're having some kind of an understanding of the oversight structure and how different things work. And then that can take 3 months. And again, 3 months, depending on what the organization is doing, that could be forever. So I guess one idea that I've started to incorporate is, at least around where data analysis is concerned, reducing the amount of time that you're looking at in history. Because it's very rare that, if you look at, for instance, 12 months or 15 months or 24 months of data, especially, that controls over those 24 months, are executed by the same people or via the same projects. And there's just so much change happening, especially in an organization that might be, implementing shared services or using analytics or robotics to execute business transactions. So potentially shortening the amount of time that you're looking at scope. And then also, pivoting a little bit to having more inquiry and, sort of like developing a really good design assessment. Clearly you have to do the operational effectiveness as well, but doing a really good design assessment, I think, is one of the best ways to promote agility, because that way, you might have isolated instances where the operations aren't perfect, but if the design is solid, you're going to have a lot more success.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't agree more on this. Absolutely. That's also what I'm saying. Always look at the design and afterwards at the execution. Mm-hmm. Finding the execution that's okay, but you don't want to have findings in the design and not understanding your risks that are you running through.
Yeah.
Looking into the future, so embracing the future, artificial intelligence and the evolution of internal audit. How do you see emerging technologies, particularly artificial intelligence, reshaping the expectations and opportunities for internal audit? What should leaders be doing now in order to prepare?
So I have to believe that this audience is pretty engaged with the concept of AI. And if you are not already, I would strongly implore that you do so soon. And it can be so simple. And in fact, I think where, skill building starts is using it in your personal life. So if you don't have, pick it, if it's Chat GPT or if it's whatever, large language model that you want to go with, you've heard great things about, start incorporating it in your daily life, because you will be blown away by the number of things that you could use it to do. So, just personally speaking, I got stung by an animal in the backyard of my house here in Texas, and I didn't know what it was, and I certainly didn't know how to treat it. It was a searing thing, and it was a scorpion.
Oh my God.
Right? And so I talked to ChatGPT about what was it, what in my backyard stung me, how do I treat it, and then I dove deep into this whole conversation with ChatGPT about, well, do big scorpions sting more than small scorpions and things like that. But so just a random example. I use it for cooking. I use it for crafting emails. Believe it or not, I use it for understanding, different kinds of business processes. So the other day I asked it, what the telephony was in the context of a shared service model, and what are the risks associated with that. So, it is truly a limitless set of, kind of tools that we now have access to that, I sometimes even go back and think in time about how my career might have unfolded differently with having this kind of power at my fingertips. It's just a game changer. And so if you have not started playing around with AI, definitely do. And I would also, kind of in the, spirit of, making sure that we, execute on controls. Many organizations have limitations on what they want you to do with their information in any kind of artificial intelligence tool. And so follow your organization's policies. If you are going to use it for purposes of work, in your personal tools and even your work tools, don't put company information in there. I did have a little stint as a cybersecurity software company CFO. So I do know a bit about, the risks associated for information. But the getting back to, upskilling yourself on AI, the more you use it in your personal life, the more you will find and, come up with like visionary ideas on how to incorporate it into your professional life. And so, one of the things that we use it for, or I have used it for is coming up with a starting point for audit programs. I've used it for, believe it or not, developing cover letters and resumes. I've used it for, like I said, understanding different business processes or in industries that I don't already know. We're having a pilot internally where we're trying to use it for reviewing contracts and populating, information from these contracts into a spreadsheet so that we don't have to spend all the time reading it. We can just have the tool go through and digest all that information and plop it into something for us. You can use it for proofreading. You can use it for summarizing meeting minutes. It's just, like I said, I haven't even scratched the surface of what it can do for us. But if you don't start playing around with it, you're certainly not going to get very far on that journey. And if you let others, kind of get the lead, they're going to keep the lead. So start now. Stop the podcast. Go download the tool if you're not doing it already.
That's great. So I hear you literally use artificial intelligence for the preparation, for the execution of the audit, also for the reporting part, summarizing text, etc., writing executive summaries. And I fully agree. It's an absolutely powerful tool.
Yeah.
But being so motivated to use AI, you might forget sometimes not upload any company related information. So you really, really need to keep this in mind.
Right. Follow the company policy. And then also, don't skip the important step of the human review of what it's telling you. It hallucinates, and these models get better and better all the time. But it is absolutely imperative that, if you want a robot to do your work for you so that you can, turn off your brain, that is the wrong approach. You still have to apply the brain. And again, you go back to what are we trying to achieve here, and not just take what the robot tells you verbatim as gospel. You need to really think about things as well. This is just a tool to help you. And one of the ways that I envisioned it is it's like the most motivated junior intern you've ever had that never gets tired and doesn't need a paycheck. So that's one way to think about it.
Do you think that having AI at our fingertip, having data analytics, do you think that the fundamental skill sets of internal auditor are changing now?
I think that, it's funny. I've been an internal auditor for so long. I still have in the back of my mind, the idea of the internal auditor having a role so similar to what external auditors were doing. And I really don't think it is that anymore. I think that internal audit, especially going forward, is going to be a lot of what we've been talking about is, supporting business, kind of understanding what the first and second lines are doing, validating that those things are happening according to good design, having even a more elevated influence message to leadership and the board on risk, and kind of like, just generally being faster and more agile and more, business savvy. So I actually think that in one way, it's going to be a little bit hard for people kind of coming up. It's almost like there's going to be this chasm between what robots can do and what like how do you build a way for people to learn some of the basics of things when the tools can do it for you, but then wind up with somebody that's senior in understanding at the end. So I feel like that's not unique to internal audit, but I could see that being something that changes how internal audit evolves as a profession.
I think that's an amazing thought to conclude the main part. Cindy, thank you so much for sharing your insights, experiences, and vision of the future of internal audit with us today. But this has been an incredibly rich conversation, and I'm sure our listeners are leaving with powerful ideas to bring back to their teams and organizations. But before I let you go, I have two final questions for you, Cindy. So number one, from your perspective, what is the true power of internal audit?
I think it comes back to a word I think I've used several times already today, and that's influence. Being able to sort of like be that quiet advisor behind the scenes that sort of steers towards better business and mission outcomes.
And if there is one piece of advice you could give to people starting in their career as internal auditor, what would that be?
Embrace curiosity and go learn everything. Don't be disappointed or discouraged by, setbacks because you're supposed to fail, but keep going. So I think that's a bunch of themes in one, because there's just so much to give new people. But, if they don't have excitement and curiosity and an appetite for, I might not do it all perfectly the first time, they're not going to keep going. And I think that's really important, being able to build in some resiliency and some, stick-to-itiveness is really important.
Thank you so much, Cindy.
Awesome.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in into this episode of Governance Unplugged. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your network, and stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversations coming soon. If you would like to discuss any topics further, feel free to contact me via the email, which is listed in the podcast notes, or connect with me directly on LinkedIn, or visit www.keystone-governance.ch. And as always, together let's build stronger, more resilient organizations, one conversation at a time. Thank you for listening in to this episode of Governance Unplugged. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep driving governance excellence.